the easiest way to get someone to overthink is to tell them not, don't overthink anything, right?
Yeah, I know, there it's like yeah, I know.
Yeah. Well, no, like I appreciate you taking the time today.
Of course.
I think one of the more interesting things I found out about you when we first connected is that you're a transplant. So
Mhm.
you're originally from Vancouver.
Correct, yeah. I was born in Afghanistan, and we moved to Geneva and Montreal, Canada.
Oh, no way.
So, yeah, French is actually my first language, and we left when I was 5 or 6 and
Yeah.
moved to Vancouver, and even then, I was enrolled in a French as a first language elementary school, and even my high school, I was
Yeah.
in the cadre program, which is essentially French as a first language classes. But, yeah, I am a transplant. So, right now, I live in Southern California, but I'm actually Canadian.
So, like, do you think coming from all of those regions, because I feel like culturally, those are like massively varying, going from like Afghanistan,
Mhm.
Geneva. Oh, I always mess up Switzerland and Sweden. Uh,
Yeah,
over to Vancouver and then the US. Like, you feel that's giving you like a unique perspective in comparison to your peers?
I would say so, and this is in no way wanting to be condescending. It's just I've experienced so many different types of people, and I didn't actually stop there. So when I finished my studies in Vancouver, I moved to Thailand for a year, then moved to Australia for a few years, and finally settled in SoCal. So has it given me perspective? I would say so. I think especially when it comes to world news and global matters, culturally, absolutely. Even there are so many layers to humanity that I've experienced, whether it's spiritual side or academic side or people that are younger than me or people that are older than me. I don't know what it is, but I think because I've traveled so much, I've adapted to so many different types of humans and just how do I put it? Yeah, I just feel like I understand humans and behavior to an extent that I don't know I would have if I didn't travel so much. And
Uh,
this openness as well. I feel like I am more open, generally speaking, in terms of perspectives and nuance. Nuance, I think that's what it is. I think I capture nuance a lot.
well, that's awesome because I feel like we live in the age of anti-nuance, so that like that must be like a superpower for you.
I think so. It's not like I'm the devil's advocate or anything, but I do see perspectives. And I'm not quick to just go with the flow and go with what social media says. And I do feel that I feel like I'm totally blowing my horn here. So like
Oh, well, that's the whole point here.
I think that I do have an ability to kind of take a step back and assess whether we're looking at a situation from all angles or if we're looking at a situation from a very narrow perspective.
Yeah.
Again, because I carry the mindset of people younger than me, I carry the mindset of people older than me, I carry the mindset of so many different cultures, carry the mindset of academics, of spirituality. Yeah, there's just a lot of layers there.
So, like, how has that affected like your career progression?
Well, it allows me to relate to people. That's another thing, right? I carry the mindset of entrepreneurship and business. My company is Business Plans USA. We help clients reach their dreams by getting them funded and we write their business plans, right? We
Mm.
match them with lenders. All to say, it's for me, the way I think I've been successful in this because I'm able to relate to people. When they come to me and they say, "Here's what I'm trying to do," I have so much experience in business because I grew up in a family of business.
Yeah.
But besides that, I think that I, to some extent, establish trust with them because when I listen to them, I just don't hear their goals. I feel their goals. I feel them on like a cellular level. I connect with them. And I
Uh,
think that's the other thing that I've been so fortunate throughout these years of like navigating all these communities, I've just learned to connect with people on a very, like, I don't wanna say a primal level, but a very, like, human, like, deep foundational level.
I hear that, and I actually think I've heard that parroted because I know from my experience in VC, a lot of investors say that the founder is extremely important, and
Mhm.
like the nature of the business. Well, I'm not gonna. I've heard some investors essentially say like the character of the founder may actually be more important than the current health of business, for lack of a
Right.
better term, right? So like it's really important to understand like the pedigree of a person and not necessarily just like the pitch deck that they're offering you.
Exactly.
So like, how would like okay, so yeah, just getting straight to the point because obviously I feel like in the space of like VC and like you know like the startup world and incubators or whatnot, there's a lot of
Mhm.
BS. You know what I mean? So you must have also like a really good BS indicator. Like is that true or no? Am I incorrect or
Probably. I
yeah
think that when I speak to someone, arrogance is probably my biggest BS indicator. Arrogance. Or people who are entitled or who think they know more than you. In fact, I don't take on those clients because I it's tough to deal with arrogance, right?
yeah
We are business plan writers, but when someone says, I've either already done it or I'm like this and this, and they really pump their experience up. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if it comes off in a way where it's like, I know more than you, it's like, then why are you hiring me? You're just going to be a pain in my ass. Go somewhere
yeah
else.
yeah
You trust me and I'll do the work for you. If you're going to be a pain in my ass, I'm probably not the right fit. So I think that would, for me, be the biggest BS bullshit indicator. So I'm a part of this group. It's called Entrepreneurial Organization. It's essentially a group of, and they're global, by the way, right? So I'm a part of the OC chapter.
yeah
The humility of these people is just so heartwarming. What I'm trying to say is these are like some of the biggest entrepreneurs, right? Not like, the biggest, but some of the biggest entrepreneurs. And the fact that they have built a community and within their community, humility is probably the biggest thing about them. That goes to show that, like, for me personally, if you approach business and life in a way like you know everything and you're above everyone and superior to everyone, then I don't know that you'll make it in the best way. Whereas with humility, you are open to accepting that things could be better. You're
yeah
open to accepting that someone who's making a lot less than you might have a piece of wisdom that you did not have.
yeah.
Right. And I feel like that's the business group that I'm surrounded by. So, yeah, my bullshit meter is probably
Yeah.
based on arrogance.
That's actually funny because I feel like there's like I've always found English very funny because like words matter, right? So it's like if you think about like con man
Mhm,
means confidence man, right? So it's
mhm,
like there's an aspect of like confidence related to arrogance that like may
mhm,
relate to like negative behaviors, right? And I would say from my experience, like I totally agree. Even in the conversations I've had on the podcast, the smartest people I've met and the most successful ones are very humble and ask a lot of questions.
mhm,
Like I had a conversation yesterday with Josh Dorfman, and he was just talking. There's two things that stood out to me, right? He's like, like, I think I'm a pretty good husband, and I know I'm a good dad, right? And like I'm like decent at business, right? And he does amazing at like all of those things. But it
mhm.
was the way he explained them is just like I think in his mind he feels like he can always do better,
Yeah, and
right?
that's a
So
very healthy approach. If you feel
yeah,
like you've reached the pinnacle of your success or the type of person you are or all of that. I don't know, are you really growing? It's good to be content and it's good to be happy with where you're at. I just don't know if, feeling like you've already hit that very max, I don't know if that would benefit you as a human. We're wired to grow and
yeah.
evolve.
I don't think it does at all because the world is a very dynamic place, and if you don't change, you're not going to adapt, and things
Yeah.
that die, right? Like
Mhm.
on the note of like things being very dynamic, like what the heck is happening in the U.S. right now? Because I was just so like there's so many different things happening on a week to week basis. It's impossible to follow up. And I find it's funny because in this position, like I sort of have to like write, I have to do content, write articles. So it's like I have to stay up to date with news, but there's too many things going on, right?
Uh-huh.
So my girlfriend helps me out with a couple of things. And then today she's just like, yeah, and what happened with this autism thing? I'm like, what? And like, I knew there was something, but like literally there's so much going on right now. I saw it, yeah, happen yesterday. And I was like, I can't even look at this right now. Like I don't have the capacity and like give me some time. I'll sit down and look at this, right? So I sat down today and I was actually watching like the press conference or whatever yesterday with like Jerome Powell. It's just like a comedy. Because like first things first is like Jerome Powell hates this guy. And he just need his body language, but just like I don't know. I'm not sure if you watched it, but just the whole nature of the conversation was insane. I think he started off with like not being able to say acetaminophen, Trump we're talking about, and then like, he didn't know the difference between Tylenol and Agvie. Uh,
I'll give you my perspective slash insight on this, okay? So
Yeah.
I live in the US. I'm a permanent resident. I am extremely mindful of what I say now on my social media, what
Yeah.
social media represents, and even what I say in podcasts because I fly and you just never know. So that's literally what I can say about that.
That's fair.
Do you
That's
see
fair.
what I mean, though? I that alone should give, like, some idea of the narrative or, like, an assumption of what I'm trying to say, but the fact is, right now, I feel like I need to censor myself because, I don't feel safe speaking.
That's
Does that make
terrible.
sense?
That's Orwellian. Like how do we get here? Yeah,
Well,
that's
yeah, once again, it's like they'll use anything against you at this time. At this time, if you're not with the certain policies, you're against the policies. And for that reason, although I have perspectives on things, I'm so mindful of
so
what I express.
it's really interesting, right? Because I'll explain it to you like this. I find perspectives have changed so much because I find the way information moves is so different and things have become so siloed, right? So it's
Mhm.
like I feel like the information, the news that you see, the information, the news that I see, and let's say like I have family in Kenya, like what they see is very different, right? Because there's been a lot of things that have been happening as of late, and it's always interesting having conversations with people in different countries because I sort of always get surprised by that perspective, right? And like, I guess like my question to you is like I did not know the climate was like that bad at the
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's that bad, but I hear a lot of stories like in my Google feed, right? And it is relevant to me because I'm Canadian
yeah.
and I'm a green card holder. So I have to know what's going on. I've seen enough news now that I don't feel comfortable being super open about my perspectives.
Yeah.
And I essentially say, "None of my business," right? I have
Yeah.
to do this. I own a business. I have to fly. I have to be very careful and very mindful. But
Yeah.
of course, when I lived in Canada, actually even before, because I've lived here for 10 years, I
Yeah.
don't know that I've ever felt this mindful and careful because there the repercussions at this time are unpredictable
Mm,
and civil rights, and I will say this, right? It's no longer a part of the equation. It just isn't. What I mean to say is before something was very obviously you can do this, you cannot do this
yeah.
in terms of government power. But now there's a very big gray area in terms of what government power is. So yeah, that's pretty much as far as I'm able to be open.
No, that's fair. And honestly, like I would that's fair. And it's super unfortunate because what I would say is that like even in the climate up here I can only speak for Toronto has changed pretty significantly. I've lived here for the last decade and it's changed a lot, even over the last 5 years, right?
Right.
And that's super unfortunate because like one of the reasons why I was super interested in talking about you is because I think right now we live in an environment where in a lot of aspects I feel like it's lacking like love. You know what I mean? And I feel like
Mhm.
love could really fix a lot of things. And it was interesting because like you obviously have like a framework for love, which essentially includes like it's not a mathematical equation, but essentially like something like that to sort of like pragmatically figure out the best fit for you, right? Like
Yeah.
how did you even get into that?
Yeah. So 20 years ago is when I got into it. I just had this very deep intrigue for human behavior. And also, I'm a feeler. I'm a lover. And with that, I decided to analyze love. So I came across something online that said you can't fall in love with someone unless they're a match. So I went ahead and I determined how to numerically determine and assess a match. So that's what the framework is about. It's how you measure yourself and how you measure your self-worth
Yeah,
and how you measure yourself against your own standards and then also how your partner measures up against that.
yeah.
So yeah, the framework just over time became so massive that I'm like, okay, now it's time to publish it. I've been writing it for about 6 years now. The editing alone took 3 years. The data analytics was a whole other stage and phase of developing this, but I officially published it about almost a year ago, November of last year.
That's awesome. How's it been? Like,
Yeah.
how's the reception?
Sorry, what was that?
How's it been? Like, how's it, like, after the release? It must feel amazing.
It's been great. I mean, in the beginning I always told myself that I don't know where it's gonna land. In
Yeah,
other words, I don't have any specific goals for this other than I hope that it creates the ripple effect and it's going to touch the people who need to be touched by it,
yeah,
right? So, I don't know if the book will ever be popular or if the framework will be popular. My only goal is that for the people who do learn about it, that it actually helps them and enhances them, and then they can start the ripple effect of love themselves. So I published it in November. I think in the last 3 months or 4 months, that's where I've really seen an uptick in terms of the theory gaining traction because I do more podcasts. But so far so good. Like the feedback has been so positive, and I think people are really receiving it in a way that is expanding their own mindset in terms of how they view their self-confidence and
yeah,
also how they view partnership
yeah,
and how to make good decisions in partnership, i.e., what it means to not settle, what it means to work on a relationship, and probably more importantly, how important it is to work on yourself before you even get into a relationship because the analytics show that you need strong self-worth, i.e., a strong self-score if
yeah.
you're going to sustain a relationship.
That part I found really interesting because it makes a lot of sense, but I guess like a lot of people don't really like fully accept that, right? Like you do need to have a strong self-worth, or for lack of a better term, you have to love yourself in order to love somebody else, right?
Exactly, exactly, and the analytics validated exactly that cliche that you can't love someone else unless you love yourself. So the analytics are showing that the people with a strong self-score, those were the ones in the relationship. The ones with the lower self-score, they were not in a relationship.
That's pretty interesting. So like
Except
have you
for
seen
one
like
group. I'm sorry,
oh
go
really?
ahead.
No, no,
There
what was
was
that?
one group that was above the people who are currently in a relationship in terms of a self-score. That group did the breaking up.
Yeah.
So yeah, in other words, they chose not to settle.
Yeah.
In other words, yeah, they did the breakup, they chose not to settle, and now they seem to be, based on the self-score, more fulfilled than the people who are currently together. Now, both of these groups have high self-scores.
Yeah.
They're above average for self-scores, both of them.
Yeah.
But all to say, it kinda normalizes being single. It's okay to be single. The analytics are showing that actually there's a strong chance you'll be even more fulfilled if you choose not to settle and you just wait for the right one.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I feel like everybody, not everybody, I feel like the healthy way to approach a relationship is to be your whole self and
Yeah.
then enter a relationship, not to try to like rely fully on somebody, right? Like obviously there's going to be weaknesses and strengths that you guys complement each other in a
Mhm.
synergetic way, but like the codependency
Yeah.
is not a healthy thing.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And we also determined that there were different zones to relationships. And basically, if you have a low self score and you match with someone with a low self score, this is what we call the red zone. And this is codependency. So it's basically a match of two people with low self worth. So what's going to happen there? They're not going to treat each other with respect because they barely respect themselves. And this is
Yeah.
not to be rude.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah. Yeah.
been there, we've all been there, right? But, but it is to be forward, and in that, it's like sometimes I think a little kick in the butt is good,
Yeah.
right? A little bit of tough love. So if you fall in red zone, you need to pick yourself back up, feel lucky to have yourself, and the moment you feel lucky to have yourself, trust me, everyone else around you will feel that way too.
So the red zone will be like toxic relationships.
Oh, yeah.
That's funny.
Oh,
That's a
yeah. 2
that's a
people who
hilarious.
aren't happy with where they're at in life?
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
Do you like, so I'm a huge football fan. I love football. So obviously when you say red zone, it's like 20 yards to the touchdown, right? And I basically what I want to say is like, do you find like there's some people that are attracted to like toxic relationships? Like that's almost like what they're programmed to do, to like go to the red zone and like score touchdowns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's unfortunate, but it's true. If you grow up in a dysfunctional household and you're used to that in your day to day, then that level of stimulation is just going to be a part of you. It's
Yeah.
sad, but it's true. Where it stops is when you decide that there's too much self harm that goes into those toxic patterns, right? Where you're infatuated, where you're impulsive, where you pushing each other's buttons and it's up and down and not stable,
Yeah.
right? So it can be fun, absolutely, but unless you get to a point where you decide, "Hey, like, it's not healthy for my emotional health and my mental health,"
Yeah.
you're just gonna keep attracting those types of partners, and you will be that type of partner too. So, for me personally, about 5 or 6 years ago, I fell in a red zone dynamic, and when things broke down, I was gutted,
I just sorry,
right?
I love that name. This is the red
The red
zone.
zone?
This
Yes, yeah.
okay, sorry, red zone
It's like where
dynamic.
you
Yeah.
don't wanna be, right? It's
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
danger zone, right?
Yeah.
But I was gutted,
Yeah.
and I was so hurt that I actually told myself, if I don't make changes to my patterns, and if I don't make changes to the decisions I make within my relationships, I will completely self-harm. So I did the framework. A, I determined that I had a low self-score. B, I determined that I fell in the extreme personality types that I identified within the framework that I'm not
Mhm.
going to get into. And then I also identified that I was suffering from an infatuation distortion, which is one of the chapters in the book. All to say, once I put pen to paper and I recognized that I myself as a partner carried a lot of red flags,
Mm.
i.e., the low self score, the extreme personality types, the infatuation, I'm like, okay, Zoe, let's take a step back. There's no reason for me to feel that bad about myself. Let's bump that self score. So I start changing my perception in terms of how I approach life as a human. I bumped it up in that way. And around the same time, a lot of great things were happening. Like I got a dog, my business was, getting better. I met my future husband. It
Okay.
started with changing my self-perception.
Yeah.
Next, I feel like the cosmos gave me gifts, or at least I was able to be open to gifts that fit my standards
Yeah.
and fit a high self-score and
Yeah.
fit an idea that I deserve this. Because when you have a high self-score, you feel like you deserve better. When you
Yeah.
have a low self-score, you'll take the shit. And that's what I was doing. I was just taking the shit, right?
Um,
Although when I was doing that, I was clearly hurting myself a lot, right? So yeah, that's essentially what the red zone is, and I feel like I'm able to kind of like talk about it a little harshly because I was there, and the reason I talk about it with like, "Hey, get your ass out of this zone," is because I was there, and it's so much better when you just feel better about yourself. God will give you so many gifts, like which has been my experience
you know,
with this framework.
I totally agree with you, and I would say even the approach you're taking is perfectly fair because I feel like everybody that's in that area or stuck in that cycle, they know it. Like it's a cycle of self harm, as you were saying,
Yeah,
right? And I think
exactly.
you do need a kick in the ass to say like, no, you got to stop this because I feel like for a lot of people, what happens, it's like behaviors are learned. Right. So even relationships, if you're used to shitty behaviors in relationships, that's what you're practicing. And unless you start practicing better, like unless you start doing best practices, that's
Mhm.
not going to change. And sometimes you can't really determine best practices unless you spend time by yourself, figure out who you are, and then sort of figure out like who works the best with you. You know what I mean? And everybody
Exactly.
has their own little journey to figure that out. But I do completely agree with you in terms of like it does take like a little of like lack of self pity.
Exactly what you're saying. You just have to work on yourself. You have to work like, be resilient and not let yourself assume that the spiral is what you deserve. There's no reason for you to not deserve self-confidence. There's
Yeah.
just no reason.
Okay. So for people who can't figure out why they can't, because I feel like that there's some people who like all their shit's together, for lack of a better term, but they keep finding themselves in this cycle. And it's clear to them that they must be in this cycle because they lack some sense of confidence or some sense of self worth.
Uh-huh.
But it's difficult for them to like determine that. Like, what would be, have you experienced that at all with people you've worked with?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, doing the framework for the self score. So essentially, the way you do it is you determine your top 5 values and you evaluate how well you are succeeding at each value. So if family is one of your values, how well are you doing at that? If education, finances, if those are your values, purpose, give yourself a score for each one. Tally up that score. That will be the numerical assessment of your self worth. For a man, the average self score was 73%.
Really?
For a woman, the average self score was 76%. So take that how you want, right? If you're slightly below 73 or a lot below, I would encourage you and challenge you to check that and ask yourself if you're being hard anywhere. or if it's true that you could be kind of performing better, doing better in life. And if that's the case, then do it. And like a perfect example is, people who say, I value education so much, but I can't afford the $100,000 education. Okay, that's fair. Totally hear that.
Yeah.
But is that really the only form of education available? Right. Or maybe someone else will say, social status is very important to me. Okay, cool. And they may feel like they're not really achieving that, but is there only one form of social status? There are so many different ways for you to feel proud socially. It doesn't have to be social media and the number of likes you get. It could be literally going for a coffee with someone who fulfills your soul. That is status in itself. That means that you're fulfilled, and that means that you have a network of people who love you, who enjoy you. That is social status for people who feel like they're not doing great in their career. And right now, it's a very unpredictable time for career because AI is coming for us, right? For many of us.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a way you can kind of enhance your career, or is it just the one way, which is a paycheck? Right. Same thing with finances. Is there any way you can enhance your confidence with finances? Does it have to be a number in your bank, or can it be knowing how to invest your money? Can it be knowing how to budget? So there are so many ways to work on your score, i.e., your self worth. First and foremost, determine what that is and build on that. And also ask yourself if your self score, or sorry, the values that you've identified are conducive to a healthy mind. If you're picking things like fashion, materialism, social status, and, like things that are not inherently fulfilling, not inherently, maybe they're good for image, maybe they're good for survival, but are they inherently fulfilling? I would check that. Like, for example, are you putting dependability and reliability as a top value? Can you depend on yourself? Can you rely on yourself? Can you rely on your partner? That should be one of your top 5 values, for example. Another one for me, because I've expanded my values from top 5 to top 10, and it's only in the last 6 months that I've done this. And this came with a lot of like self-reflection in terms of what truly makes me happy, what's my true individuality. And I recognize that peace of mind is actually so important to me
You
beyond
don't like chaos?
everything. What?
You're not a fan of chaos?
No, but you'd be surprised because a lot of people are. A lot of people are. A lot of people
Yeah.
will invite chaos. I've met people who love drama, right? And it's very difficult to be around, right? For me, it's just peace of mind. That's why I pick and choose my clients. I pick
Yeah.
and choose my environment. And if something does not fit who I am and it's starting to cause thoughts to loops in my mind to loop, that takes away from my peace of mind. If I cannot sleep at night, I don't have peace of mind, clearly. So for me, that's a top 5 value, or top 10 value, I should say. So what
No.
does that mean? That means that not only am I going to engage in acts that bring me peace of mind, that means that when I do connect with a partner, right,
Yeah.
my husband, I expect him to not anchor down my peace of mind. Because if he does that, then I would score him lower than me and I would say, "Hey, you're not fulfilling this for me," right? And it's also a really good for a tool for communication because if I feel like he's not scoring as high for peace of mind, it allows me to tell him, "Hey, I need you to kind of," not that this has happened, right? I'm just giving you an
Yeah.
example
Yeah. Yeah.
of how not only you should show up for yourself, but when you connect with someone, they should meet your standards. That's what I'm trying to say.
That makes sense. Let me ask you this question then, right? Because I have so many. You brought up so many good points to be like that. I have so many questions, right?
Yeah.
So, like, peace of mind obviously is very important. That makes a lot of sense. That's non-negotiable for you, obviously, right? Is there any like sense where, like, let me ask, like, is there any flexibility? Like, is there any context where it's like there's a scenario that happens and like now you have to experience something that you're not typically used to?
Of course. Of course. There's actually a chapter in the book called The Default Range. Okay. So you're going to experience moments in life where it's not possible for you to feel like you're on top of your game career wise or on top of your game peace of mind wise, right? And for me, freedom is another one of my values, right? There's going to be moments where I feel like I'm not free. If I
Yeah.
have to stay at work late or if like I have to go hang out with someone that I really don't want to, right? Like, that kinda takes away from my of course, but there should be a basis, right? There should be, like, one number or a range that's consistent over time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
also, by the way, if you're not eating well, if you're drinking a lot, if you're surrounding yourself with toxic people, expect that your perception of all of these values and how you show up, expect that to drop because you also need a healthy mind. Much of this has to do with perception. If your mind is not healthy, your perception of you will not be great, nor will your perception of your partner. So it's so important for you to also engage in healthy habits, keep your mind healthy, keep your body healthy so that you can assess things in a positive way. When you have healthy serotonin flowing in your mind or dopamine, that's how you view life with a positive lens.
Yeah.
Right. And a motivated lens and a happy lens. But if you are depleted in those healthy neurochemicals, like, you're gonna be irritated and annoyed, and you're gonna have a jaded lens.
It's actually great because like this leads into a lot. This leads into my next stream of questions, right?
Uh-huh.
But I want to circle back for 1 second because you were talking about high self score being important and how
Mhm.
men typically have a bit of a lower self score on average than women and why that is, right? And I'm not sure if you've seen it, but like there's a reel or like meme or whatever. It's like gym motivation for like men and women, and it's like this guy and his girlfriend, right? And it's going back and forward with them in the gym about like their gym motivation, like what it would look like. And it's
Yeah.
like hers is like all like very positive, like I'm strong, I'm powerful, I am the best, right? And his is like, I'm the worst, I'm weak, I must get stronger, right?
Oh, shoot.
Yeah, no, it's funny, and I find it interesting how they're going back. I find it very interesting how like that's the truth though, right? Like I find the cultural rhetoric on a gender basis on social media at the very least is very much so that, right? Like I find like that's and possibly that's why men have a lower self-worth score because essentially everyone's on social media right now. It may not be the healthiest, right? And the values on social media are essentially are not the most indicative for a lot of specifically young men to have a
Uh-huh.
high level of self-worth, right? So
Mhm.
maybe that almost gets ingrained in their personality as they grow older, right? Because there's just the idea of like constant competition and that like you lack value. I would say from a
Mhm.
social media perspective, right? And you
Mhm.
sort of see that illustrated through like there's been a recent uh what's the word I'm looking for? Like sprawl of steroid use amongst like Gen Z and like younger kids. Like yeah, there's like
Really? I did
yeah,
not know that.
I've been going to the gym since I was like
Really?
13. I've literally been going to the gym longer than I've not been going to the gym, right? And so throughout my like gym life, I've known there's always been people that did droids, but they were almost like the smokers in high school that were in the pit. And they're like
Like, they
10%.
were like, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, right.
totally.
Now it's become like mainstream. And it's like
Mhm.
kids, like college kids, like 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, taking at first it was like SARMs, so like oral steroids, but now they're just hopping on like the biggest thing right now in terms of like fitness influencers, right? Is all steroid guys. You have
Mhm.
Sam Stulek, you have the Trend twins, like these are all guys that openly take steroids, right? And I think that sort of relates into this whole aspect of men having low self-worth because don't get me wrong, I value being strong and being healthy, but you almost ask yourself, like, why are you risking your long term health for this short term benefit? You know what I mean? Like, I'd love to
That is
see.
so interesting to me because actually the analytics showed I'm gonna pull them up real quick. The younger groups tended to have stronger self-worth.
Really?
So the ones with the lowest self it was my group, so the millennial group.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but what? Say that again? We're so hard on ourselves, right?
It's Green Day. Green Day and emo music just ruined us. You know what I mean? Like,
Green Day.
My Chemical Romance came around, just ruined a whole generation. But no, no, that's super interesting though. Like, why do you think that is?
Uh, I'm really not sure. So I can tell you the stats right now,
Yeah.
but I didn't compare men to women in these stats. So this is just by age, okay? 18 to 24 years, their self score 79%.
79?
79%.
Okay.
That's very high.
Yeah.
So this could be maybe like the college years, maybe like they're going out, maybe they're drinking, maybe they're feeling very social.
Mm,
I don't know, but and the median was 80%. But
yeah.
then when you go to 25 to 34 years, 74%. So we see a 5% drop in self-worth. with a very wide range. At the lowest, it was 20%, at the highest, it was 100%, and the median here was 76%. Next, we have 35 to 44 years old with an even lower self score of 73%. So this is probably around the time that people are getting married, having kids, having a mortgage,
Yeah.
and wondering if they can handle it all. I'm assuming that's what that means, where
Yeah.
life is really kicking them in the ass.
That's because you basically just like scientifically proved that. You proved age. It just takes like years off your soul year after year, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's adulting, right? This
Yeah.
is literally the numerical statistical assessment of what adulting will do to you.
Yeah.
So then 45 to 54 was about the same, 74%. 55 to 64, again, about the same, 73%. So from 35 to 64 seems
Yeah.
pretty consistent. Before that, that's when we see the drop. Sorry, the increase, right?
And what are some of the questions basically that like allude to self-worth?
It's basically a scale. So the survey, the way it's laid out is identify your top 5 values, and then we give them categories, and then we say, "How well do you feel you meet each of these values on a
Uh,
scale of 1 to 10?" So that's how we essentially do it.
okay, that's
And
actually
then guess what? The lowest self-score, and this makes me sad, was, 65 and plus at 67%. That was the lowest self-score.
I wonder why. Because here's the thing. I wonder the way you frame the question. I wonder if it's more so like because it's almost like what we were talking about before, how successful people are very humble. You know what I mean? And I feel like with age, my priorities have changed. And when I think about what's the most important to me, I feel like I'm doing the correct things, but I feel like I could be doing better because I've seen people that do better than me, and I aspire to be better. So it's almost like I have a more realistic image of like my efficacy. You know what I mean? So I almost wonder if it's like not necessarily like a negative thing, but they're just like, well, I'm older now. I know specifically like what I should be doing. And I know I could be doing it better.
Possibly, but
I want, yeah,
the way the framework understands this is everything is based on self-perception. Even if you feel like there's a lot of room for growth, you can still feel confident with where you're at. So I see what you're saying, and that comparison aspect, I think this is due to social media. We
right.
have our friends posting about marriage and other weddings and their new home and now their new baby. That will inevitably start to leak into our subconscious and say, oh shit, should I be doing the same thing?
Yeah.
Also, I think that millennials, like, I really feel like to some extent we were given the shit end of the stick because we went through 2 crises, the global crisis in '08 and then COVID happened too, right?
There's so much.
That
Yeah, go on.
and plus a big jump in education in terms of cost. Right. So all of these factors combined, I think made us kind of struggle to find the right job, to find a good wage, and to keep up with the Joneses. Then we had social media coming in. So I just feel like to a large extent, I do think that millennials are lucky, and I think we're the richest group right now. But I still think that we've been through a lot.
So, and I agree. And my question to you would be, it's actually pretty funny because I was just having this conversation with my girlfriend, but like this generation's actually experienced much more trauma than is publicly acknowledged, in my humble opinion. And it's
Yeah.
actually having more of a tangible effect, which again, unfortunately, is not being publicly like acknowledged, right? So, like the way I look at it, right? It's not. It was we had 9/11 and then the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan that had a huge effect on like our generation because a lot of people went to war, not just in the US, but in Canada. I went to university with this with a Fallujah. I didn't know he fought in Fallujah. And then like one day he comes to my room with like knives. But it's like everyone sort of had an experience of that. It's like our generation got affected by that. Then you had the '07 to '09 crisis, financial crisis that had affected the job market, right? And then if you really think about it, we had QE that started in 2011, right?
Okay, you can edit it.
Just to go back to what you say, I agree. This generation's experienced a lot more trauma than is publicly acknowledged, and it's actually having its tangible effects now. Like I think even from like a wealth perspective, we have a huge polarity in income, or like a wealth income gap, right? And I think you were saying this before. Like Gen Z is less receptive to the rules or the norms of things because they've seen us suffer. You know what I mean? So they ask themselves the question of like, do I want to also go through the same things you went through to be in the same position you're at? Because it doesn't really make sense. So it's like they're questioning all these elements of society because it's like the social contract is not really benefiting you guys. So like, why am I going to pay attention to that?
It's true, it's true. And that makes perfect sense. I think that the cool thing and beauty of Gen Z is that they're very how do I put it? It's the social contract. I think that they're analyzing, reevaluating that social contract and determining whether X amount of dollars towards education, if the ROI on that is worth it, right? Also, how our government, all governments, by the way, are treating the world and their people. And now we have Gen Z who are very confident, by the way, who have been taught confidence and taught to voice their opinions. Boy, are they voicing. They really are, right? So for that, I totally hear it. I don't disagree with where they're coming from, right? I think millennials are probably a bit more balanced when it comes to that. So having like an equal sense of purpose and, that traditional, what does work truly mean? What does authority mean? And being mindful and careful not to overstep, right? Especially when we're talking authority. So I think there's a bit more consequence. And we're aware of consequence, I
Yeah.
think. I don't know that Gen Z is as aware of consequence. Right?
Consequence only matters. It only has significance when there's an incentive. But if
Mhm.
there's no incentive, the consequence doesn't matter.
Mhm.
You know
Yeah,
what I mean? So, and I feel like we're actually at this weird breaking point in society where like they do have a right to question what's happening right now. Cause I feel like everybody is questioning and maybe questioning is an important thing to do right now at this moment. Right.
I
Because
totally agree. I
yeah,
totally agree. If it wasn't for Gen Z, I don't know that certain social matters and global matters right now would be as there would be as much awareness. And there are global matters happening right now that we all need to be paying attention to. And I think that it's their voice, their relentless voice, that is forcing the rest of us to listen and to pay attention. So for that, I absolutely commend them. It's going to be very interesting to see just how they evolve, right? Because I think millennials, when it comes to work, for the most part, I think that we're mostly secure. I don't know that Gen Z has the same level of security right now. A, because of technology and AI, B, because of their own approach towards work, right? And their own approach towards authority. They don't like authority, which I get, but it's a necessary evil if you're going to land a job and, be somewhere for long and, kind of pay your dues and all of that. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that generation evolves and
yeah,
what will become of them when they're our age.
yeah. And honestly, like I feel like right now in this moment, there's so many changes. Cause again, I want to stay within the bounds. There are so many changes happening right now to the global economy. Well, I'll just speak to it, right? The recent announcement of this gold card thing and the whole implication for H-1B visas, that could be actually very significant.